Hi. Let's talk today about the connection between addictions and confidence. This is a really big one and an important one to examine because confidence has such a strong effect, such a strong influence on what we choose to do with our lives, on how we choose to express our creative potential and our creative power in this world, or whether, just how we choose to express our desires or whether we choose to hide and not express them. I don't think that we ever ultimately hide forever. I actually believe that there comes a time for everybody where we do discover and then step into our full potential. So it's not a question of whether, it's a question of when. And having said that, I want to go into just the dynamics a little bit of how addiction plays into confidence and just the sort of relationship there. So when we have something that we are doing, like a food behavior, binge eating, or maybe we're drinking, by the time that we've admitted to ourselves that it's an addiction, we've established to ourselves, we've seen part of our consciousness, our awareness has established, it's observed enough that this thing that we're doing, this behavior, is actually not good for us. It's not serving us. Before that point, we've actually done that addiction probably for some time, or not addiction, right? It's not called an addiction yet. We've done that behavior for some time, maybe a little bit of time, maybe a long time. It's all relative. But heretofore, it hasn't been considered an addiction. It's maybe even served a purpose in some way. We've gotten joy out of it. We've gotten something out of it that we have deemed worthwhile, whether that was a conscious decision or that was an unconscious decision. And by the time that we actually are calling it an addiction, we've admitted to ourselves, I am doing something that feels like it has more power over me than, it feels sort of like I don't have choice over it. And I know at the same time that it's not in my best interest. So at this point, this is a sign that the soul is growing to the point where the higher self is really kind of knocking on the door and saying, I really want to come out and shine my light and not live in the cocoon anymore. Because there is a time along the evolutionary curve of every soul, not every soul, but that's a technical matter, but most of us, where we are really just coping. We're coping with the pain of being alive. We're coping with things that seem bigger than us. And we actually are in some way served, right? These addictions, these coping mechanisms serve to create the walls of our cocoon because they, one, give us a sense of that we can get pleasure, we can get joy, we can get that feeling of connection, right? That you get through, any addict knows that feeling of kind of getting the hit. And so we feel like we can get that hit and we can get it privately. We don't have to step outside and become vulnerable to another human. We don't have to become vulnerable to our community. We don't have to show our inner pain. We can get that fix on our own. So it serves to create this cocoon around us. And that cocoon keeps us in a way safe, and it keeps us growing in some ways, right? We are developing on a very, very kind of internal, slow level that's not really seen by the outside world, but we're not yet ready to show that to anybody. And we're very much holding on to everything that's keeping us safe inside of that. So we can say that before an addiction is really called an addiction, it's just what everybody does at a certain stage in their evolution, or most everybody, most people, which is coping. And yet there comes a time in our evolution when we realize it's like a light turns on, and this isn't always overnight. Sometimes it's gradual. We get first a little inkling, then a little bit more, and then a little bit more clarity that coping is actually not fully living. Before, we couldn't handle fully living. We thought it'd probably be too painful, and we thought, at least I can stay over here and enjoy something and find comfort in something. Real life, no thank you. Too much. Then we come to a point where we actually start to feel like, you know what? This feels dangerous to step out into real life, and yet it feels like a choiceless choice. As Jiddu Krishnamurti would say, it feels like there's nowhere else to go. If I'm to keep living, this drive to live is driving me toward letting go of some of these crutches. So here is where it starts to get intense. And here's where the confidence starts to come in. So before we were coping, we didn't even really know that there was something more to life. If we had an inkling, we kind of ignored it. Now we're realizing I actually want that something more, and I'm terrified. And we're starting to say, I realize that what I'm doing is now preventing my growth, right? My pattern, my addiction. And we deem it an addiction. And once we do that, there's an inner conflict instantly, because a part of you knows that this thing you're doing is not healthy. It's not in your interest. But another part of you is still clinging on to that cocoon and doesn't feel safe out there in a full big world with zero defense. So what do? Well, it's all built in to work and, perfectly. It's all designed perfectly, as it always is. But it's no fun, and I'll tell you why, as you probably know from your experience. Every time after we've identified that this is addiction, every time we succumb to it, every time we decide to act on it, the pain intensifies, right? First, it didn't used to be painful, and then it starts to become more painful and a little more painful and a little more painful. And then there's this really confusing period of time where we're thinking to ourselves, what on earth is going on here? I used to love this thing. It used to make me happy. In fact, it was the only thing that made me happy. And now it causes me so much pain, and I don't know how else to get happy. And so this is such a painful place to be in, and it serves to drop our confidence, because actually, let me get back to that. Let me just back up a little bit and say that why this is designed perfectly is because this sharp pain that we start to feel is exactly what drives us to step out of our addiction, even a little bit, right? A little bit, baby step at a time, and to find other things that make us happy. Again, this doesn't happen usually, from what I've observed, overnight. It can look something like this, right? So you maybe have an addiction to food, and then you start, you're still in that hell. Every day is a struggle, but one day you're out, walking around town feeling hopeless and you see a flyer out for a knitting class, and for some reason it catches your eye and you feel desperate enough that you call the number or you look up the website and you go to the class, and maybe you only watch at first, but you realize that there's a spark there. Somehow you're able to find joy in something other than your addiction. And this is a new feeling. And usually it's quite refreshing and beautiful. And it's like opening up a window after a long winter where you haven't opened the windows in a long time, right? And it's this feeling of, I didn't even know that was possible. And then you can trust. So you're still in this period. Maybe that feeling goes away and then you're like, well, where did that go? I caught a glimpse of it. Where did it go? That's how it works in this transition period, is we get glimpses. It works in glimpses. But the more conscious that we become and the more we start to ask for those glimpses and those moments and say, source energy, God, universe, whatever you speak with, whoever you talk to, saying, I want more of that, even if it's just saying that to your own self inside or writing it in your journal. I want more of that. I want more of that other thing that made me happy in a healthy way, in a creative way. And this is key, because I believe that our true longing is to create connection, create love in many forms, music, art, but all of this is creation, right? So it's a good thing that the pain intensifies, and it's not fun, especially to that part of you that's still holding on to the addiction, right? It realizes that it can't do that thing anymore without severe consequences and a high price. But you still get to choose. You still get to choose whether you're going to do it. So the other thing to understand here is that the change is gonna be gradual, unless you're the kind of person that says, no, I know for a fact that I'm done, and then you're done. But from what I've seen, a lot of the time it often is gradual. And what's happening, people say that addiction is a progressive disease. What I think is really going on here is this pain that we're talking about. Because, addiction, whatever our behavior is, it starts to feel like more and more and more like an addiction. We start to become more and more aware of ourselves as trying to get a hit, a fix, rather than doing something healthy for ourselves. So, yes, why the addiction is a progressive disease is that we start to have our consciousness is actually waking up to what's really going on here, and we're ready for something more. And it's kind of like being a 3-year-old wearing a 2-year-old's onesie. Suddenly you're like feeling very constrained and it's painful. Maybe you have attachments to it, but your awareness is growing that it's not serving you in the same way anymore. And eventually you will be able to let go. You absolutely will be ready to let go. So confidence, back to confidence. This is a very important place to understand. Whenever we make a promise to ourselves, such as, I will never drink alcohol again, I will never eat chocolate again, I will never call that person again. If we break that promise, our confidence plummets, because our confidence, our trust in ourselves is broken. Not that it can't be rebuilt. It absolutely can. However, we do go through a period where we feel hopeless. We feel so terrible about ourselves. We feel like, who can I even trust if I can't even trust myself? Now, the remedy to this, and I've had to learn this the hard way, is actually a concept from business that's called, that goes like this: under promise, over deliver. So it's self-explanatory. It's about looking inside yourself and asking yourself, are all the parts of my being, is every cell of my body on board with making this promise right now? And if it's not, I guarantee you that it will be broken. So instead of making blanket statements, even though we're in so much pain, even though it feels like the relieving thing to say, I will never drink again, I will never eat, I will never binge again, whatever it is, even though it feels like such a relief to say that, and we feel kind of temporarily safe in that little box that we've created of our promise, instead of doing that, if we can look at what feels completely doable for us. Maybe it's a little bit of a challenge. It doesn't feel like, well, duh, of course I'm not going to do that. It feels like a little bit of a challenge, but it feels totally doable. And then only making promises that are that size. So, for instance, instead of saying, I will never eat chocolate again, you can say to yourself, I promise I will not eat chocolate today. Or you can say, I promise I will not eat chocolate for the next 2 hours. Or you can say, I promise I won't binge in the next 5 minutes. So even if it's that small and you do it gradually, you'll start to build up layers of confidence in yourself. I can do this. And in fact, there's a part of us that doesn't even really care if a step is a baby step or a large step. It has to be believable for us. And that part of us that doesn't really care, it just kind of has this on and off mechanism. It's like, did you succeed or did you fail? Did you do what you said you were going to do or did you not do that? Right? So, and again, if we didn't, we can always remedy, we can always heal. But the kind of most effective approach that I found from the beginning is looking inside of ourselves and saying, taking a really baby step. Because we have to remember that climbing any mountain is a series of the smallest baby steps. And what we don't want to do is try to take such a big step that then we roll backwards and we're convinced that we're going all the way down the mountain and undoing all the progress that we've done. And even if that's not true, we're convinced it's true because we feel like such a failure in that moment. So don't do that to yourself, because that's really that creates a bad, a negative relationship with the self, and that's just something best avoided. So better to say, honey, just give it a day, give it 5 hours, try a little bit more of a challenge than you tried last time. And then you'll see your confidence grow. Awareness is everything. Awareness is what carries us through to the other side of our addictions, of our habits that are not serving us anymore. It heals our relationships, and it helps us ultimately to achieve our dreams. So trust in your awareness. Grow your awareness as much as you can by slowing down, by doing practices that help you get centered and present, whether that's meditation or just walking in the woods or journaling or gardening. Right? There's so many, or balancing your checkbook. Whatever it is, find ways. Actually, let me take that back. Rather than, there's this piece of doing things that are really healthy and healing, like balancing the checkbook and gardening and things like that, but also take time for yourself to just reflect and do the introspection piece. Because that's what's going to help grow the witness, help grow the awareness, and do that in tandem with the other sort of healthy activities that you find along the way. And be easy on yourself. Don't beat yourself up, because you will. You are absolutely getting out of this. And struggling and feeling that pain is part of it. It's something that everybody who's dealt with addiction is familiar with, and you're not alone. I will see you next time.